Again, welcome everybody. I am Rebecca Lopez-Chris. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Policy and Outreach, and today I'm joined by a whole cadre of staff. Crescinda Martin, she is the new Director for Taxpayer Services. She leads our customer interactions for the call center and our email correspondence. Also, Kelly Beatrice and Kurt Roberts, who are part of our training staff, especially around the Philadelphia Tax Center. Also, Rochelle McJett-Beatty is our resident expert from the tech staff. And I am joined today by our communication staff, Christian Crespo and Elias Gonzalez, who are going to be helping manage the chat and help us stay on track and all of those good things. So first of all, I want to thank you all for joining us. Clearly, disregarded entities is a topic that people want to know more about. We have had over 120 people register for this event in the last 3 days. And given the attendance right now that steadily is creeping up, we are excited that you are here. This webinar series is a new thing for us. It's a pilot. So we welcome your feedback, and we would actually love to hear more from you about topics that are that might be important or that would be helpful for you. We're going to put a link in the chat to some of the future topics. Those are things like understanding use and occupancy, streamlining refunds, and what is a Philadelphia receipt, and how does Nexus work in the city of Philadelphia? So we're running this series on the third Wednesday of each month. We'd love your feedback. Does this time of day work? Again, what are other topics? Someone already asked me about school income tax. Is Teams okay? Do you prefer Zoom? We want to hear it, and you all love to tell us your opinion, so we look forward to that. Okay, so the agenda for the day, I'm going to turn this over to Crescinda Martin, who is going to explain how disregarded entities are treated in Philadelphia. And again, please put your questions in the chat as we go, and we'll be monitoring them. Christian and I will be monitoring them, and so Crescinda, be prepared. I might hop in and interrupt you a little bit. Next, Kelly Beatrice will go through a demonstration of how to register a disregarded entity. This is a two-step process, and Kelly's going to show you how to do it. So we're going to get started. I'm going to mute my mic, and we're going to let Crescinda take over from here. And Crescinda, just let me know when you want me to move the slides, because
Rebecca, if I may add,
yes.
Folks prefer to utilize the Q&A section for the questions instead of the chat. We can keep the chat open for more interactions and the Q&A for your questions. The content that allows us to monitor better and make sure that we address them all. So at the top of the meeting, you should see a Q&A button. And thank you for joining. All right, Crescinda, back to you.
Thank you, Christian and Rebecca. Hello, everyone. Like Rebecca said, my name is Crescinda Martin, and I am the new Director for Taxpayer Services, and I specifically handle email and the call center. So previously, I was the training manager for the Revenue Department, so I'm pretty well-versed in disregarded entities. There may be some questions that you have that I might not be able to answer, but I will get back to you with an answer if there is one. So just without further ado, we're going to jump into it. What is a disregarded entity? Well, for tax purposes, a disregarded entity is a legal entity, but it is disregarded or ignored for federal tax purposes. I'm just going to read it from here. It only applies if the structure includes a primary owner or a parent company. So a parent company would be whoever, in most cases, we have what's called a single member LLC. So the single member would be the parent company, and under that would be what we call the child company or the disregarded entity. And so the subsidiary or the SMLLC will exist legally, but won't be treated as a separate for tax filing to the federal government. All income flows directly to the primary owner or parent company for tax purposes. You can use the next slide, Rebecca. For example, a person who owns multiple companies, that would be the parent company. The federal government requires that this person pay taxes on their income from these businesses on their individual 1040 using the Schedule C. Philadelphia considers this person the primary owner or parent company. Now, do we have any questions about that? Because I think this is where most people get a little mixed up or turned around. But do we have any questions so far, Rebecca?
Well, Mr. Dallo asks if there'll be downloads for the slides. Absolutely. We'll be sharing that for anyone who's registered. I think just two quick things. SMLLC is a single member LLC, right? It's just it's one
Yes.
person. And I think I didn't get this until I actually looked at a federal tax form where your individual 1040, and then it has that section that says, do you have other income from a business? And then you have to fill out some other schedules depending on your situation. And so typically that's the Schedule C. And I think that's where it kind of made sense to me that like, oh, okay, this person, even if they have a bunch of different companies, that one person is gonna like
Right.
combine all that all the income from those three different companies or however many companies on their personal 1040. And that was when that like it kind of made sense to me. Someone is asking, where would a sole proprietor fit into this if your company isn't an LLC? It's the same thing, right?
Right. It would be the same thing. So if you are a sole proprietor and you have an LLC, then you would still be what we would consider the parent company. You would still file on behalf of your disregarded entity.
Do you want to go
Does
through
that
the
make sense?
example? Yeah.
Okay. For example, Ben Franklin, an individual, owns 3 businesses. Each business is structured as a single member LLC and is disregarded for federal tax purposes. So over here we have Ben Franklin. He files the BIRT and the MPT with the Social Security number. So he is the parent company. He would file the BIR and the MPT under his social. I hope that makes sense to everyone. If not, please raise your hand and let me know
Well,
so that we
right,
can go
because
back and dig a little bit deeper.
that's
Go ahead.
because when you file your 1040, you file your 1040 with the federal government on your social security number, right?
Mhm.
Right. And there was a question like, I think we're going to answer a few of the questions that are in the chat with this example. Like, yes, a single person can own multiple companies that are all going to be considered disregarded, and they're all going to kind
For
of
tax
flow underneath
purposes.
that person.
Correct.
Okay. All right, keep going. We'll
Angela.
see.
Oh, okay. So this means that Ben Franklin, he's the owner or the parent company, is responsible for filing BIRT and net profit for Philadelphia, but not for other agency taxes such as wage, use and occupancy, and other taxes aside from the income taxes. Okay, so if Ben Franklin owns several LLCs or disregarded entities, Ben Franklin would file all of the BIRT and net profit made from those businesses under Ben Franklin's social security number. All of the other taxes, let's say if you have a wage tax, or if you have a liquor account, or if you have use and occupancy, would go under the disregarded entities account.
All right,
I hope
let's
that
do the
makes
next
sense.
slide. And I think that'll also help people understand what we're talking about here. Here we go.
Okay, so filing BIRT and net profit as a disregarded entity. A disregarded entity, LLC, does not file its own business income and receipts tax returns. The primary owner or parent company files these returns. So again, we're going back to Ben Franklin. So Ben Franklin is the one with the social. He's the parent. Ben Franklin owns several other companies. They all have what's called an employer identification number, or EIN. So once Ben Franklin goes to file for his taxes for business income and receipts, all of that will be filed under Ben Franklin's social security number. All of the other agency taxes will be filed under the individual, like say if one of your LLCs or one of your disregarded entities has employees, the wage tax will be filed under the disregarded entity and not under the BIRT or not under the parent company. I hope that
I'm going
makes
to back
sense.
up really quickly.
Mhm.
So there is a question in the chat that I think is a good one. which
Okay.
is, what if one of those disregarded entities doesn't do business in Philadelphia? So for example,
Mhm.
uh, well, okay, let's say we've got this rental property. Let's say it's not in Philadelphia, that 1401 JFK LLC. What if it's a rental property that's in Ardmore or something? How does that change?
So, and that's a really good question. So if you have a disregarded entity that owns property somewhere else in Philadelphia, that's not really um that's not really our business. What would happen is, as a sole proprietor, what would happen, you would have to report that income.
Right? Is if you live in Philadelphia,
Mhm.
even if you're doing business outside of Philadelphia, you still are going to pay NPT on that income.
Correct.
Right. But the individual sales of that business may not be subject to,
To to
right,
Philadelphia taxes.
right.
Correct.
To
But
complicate,
if
this is
you
why we tell everyone to work with a tax professional, a real live person who understands how taxes work in Philadelphia. All right, let's keep moving. There are a lot of
Rebecca, can we go
questions.
back? I'm sorry. Can we go
Yeah.
back just so that we can dig in a little? I don't want that to go over head. Just for the simple fact that, again, if you are, let's say, if you have a disregarded entity that owns property in Philadelphia, excuse me, outside of Philadelphia, you as the individual owner, you would still have to report your income from any rental business under your under NPT, under a net profit tax, if you are a resident of Philadelphia. Okay,
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. There are a lot of people on this call, and their questions are coming fast and furious.
I'm
So
sure. I'm
um,
sure. Go ahead. We
so
can go ahead. We can go.
So there's a question about, would you pay BERT on that property or that business that's outside of Philadelphia? And it's on this, BERT is on sales that occur in Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia.
Right. But you, as an individual, you still make money off of that business. It all flows to
And make sure.
you, and you file
Right.
that on your federal return. You're going to file that in the 1040. So those sales might not be subject to BERT because they were outside of Philadelphia, but the profits that you earn because you're a Philadelphia resident would mean that you owe net profits tax.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's kind of sort of like a wage tax, quote unquote.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But we can save that conversation for later. All right. Do you?
Okay. So Disregarded
We,
Entity LLC, I'm just going to go back over it, does not file its own business income and receipts tax returns. The primary owner or parent company files these returns. For the net profits tax, income is combined and reported by the primary owner or parent company for filing purposes. These taxes are filed under the primary owners or parent company's Social Security or EIN. Corporations usually withhold and pay the wage tax on behalf of executives, employees.
right. So that's the reminder that if you have a corporation, corporations don't pay net profits tax. But
Right.
that's because all their staff, and including the owner, are all on payroll, and we withhold wage tax for those folks. Okay.
Okay.
All right. However, the disregarded entity, they have their own responsibilities, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So each subsidiary may still need to separate accounts for wages, use and occupancy, and also all other Philadelphia agency taxes. These are filed under the LLC's or Q subs employer identification number. So LLCs or Q subs with employees must register for wage tax, withhold it, and remit this tax on behalf of their employees. So if you have if you have a disregarded entity that actually has employees that are working for the disregarded entities, with your the wages would be withheld under the LLCs or the Q subs EIN number and remitted to the city on the employee's behalf. I mean, that's really self-explanatory, but it can be a little difficult when you're trying to deal with these taxes of who files and who pays. So I
So
hope
this,
that, go ahead, I'm sorry.
well, there's a couple of questions in the chat that are not, they're tertiarily related. So one is how about taxpayers who get a 1099 rather than our employees? Now that's slightly different. We consider folks who receive a 1099 as a business. We consider
Right.
them as a like a contracting business, and the IRS has very strict guidelines on what is considered an employee and what is not an employee. So it is very important that if you are actually an employee, that your employer is treating you appropriately as an employee. If they just decide that they don't want to do that, that's actually not legal. So, but again, I would work with a professional. But if you have a contract with them, or you're just, whatever that is, if you receive a 1099, and meet the other IRS guidelines as to what is an employee and what isn't, then we consider you a business on your own, and you're gonna need to file BERT and NPT on that income. There's another question, and so Crisinda, correct me, please jump in and correct me when I'm wrong.
No, go ahead. No, you weren't wrong. You were good. That was good.
The other question was, what about virtual work? Somebody who is a psychologist and a Philadelphia resident. So this is actually very interesting. And as an aside, we do like a revenue tax 101. We do a revenue tax 101 with like the free library and with the community college. And we go through all of these taxes, including things like what's a Philadelphia receipt and what is apportionment, and some of these more like complex topics. The thing that you need to understand is, as a service-based business, you're what was a psychologist, or you're doing virtual work, where you do the service. If you're doing that out of your house in Philadelphia, we consider that as a Philadelphia receipt. If you were a psychologist and you went on site somewhere else and your business was someplace else, then we would consider that service to be outside of Philadelphia. It would not be a taxable thing. But if you're working in Philadelphia as a service provider, then those sales have occurred in Philadelphia. Now, if you sell a tangible product, like that's really easy, right? Like I have a candle, I sold it in Philadelphia, or I sold it at the farmer's market in Ardmore, right? It's very easy to see which sale is which, or like where the sale occurred. But for services, it's where did you do the work? Okay, all right. All right, so here's your recap. Here's the big moment.
So disregarded entities simplify income tax reporting for its owners. Simplify.
It does, sort of.
Simple, but it is. Philadelphia aligns with federal rules by requiring owners to file BERT and NPT. Separate local tax accounts may still be required for subsidiaries depending on activity. For example, liquor tax. So if you have a liquor tax that you have a restaurant, let's say, and your LLC or your disregarded entity actually owns and runs the restaurant, then the liquor tax will be paid under the LLC and not necessarily the parent. So clear registration ensures compliance and avoids penalties. And one of the things that we try to do is make ourselves available to questions about disregarded entities, because they are so complicated or so complex. And we actually follow what the federal government requires us to do. However, we do have a lot of misunderstandings, and we want to make sure that you have the correct information. So we do make ourselves available to answer these questions. If you have any questions, I will make myself available to you to go over what we've talked about.
And we're going through the chat. Like, we're going to keep track of this chat, and we're going to make sure that we provide follow-up that kind of it gives us a larger chance to elaborate on some of the questions that are in the chat.
Yes.
And Rebecca,
Yes.
if I may suggest that you bring up the sample one more time on that slide real quick, because I think what's helpful for, depending on who you are and what you determine was best for your
Wait and
business,
see.
really the structure of your business, it's something that you probably would consult with a professional, and sometimes you are doing it for the purpose of, your business is in different jurisdiction, your business, so usually you construct this structure for your business to serve different purposes and not necessarily thinking of the different jurisdictions where you are having activity. And so that really, it's what determines what your disregarded entity structure is, and what are the nexus or business activity that you're having within Philadelphia County. And so it's not revenue that it is determining how your business structure is constructed, but it's more of a how you are registered with each jurisdiction, and for each company, how do you submit that paperwork with the State Department in Pennsylvania, and that what comes down with how it's really set up in Philadelphia, more than us doing it for you. Was that helpful?
I hope so. I think we should. I'm going to stop sharing, and then Kelly, Beatrice, you can go ahead and take over. We will continue to answer questions in the chat, and we'll go from there. But Kelly, I'm really excited to see your demo.
Thanks, Rebecca. As Rebecca mentioned, my name is Kelly Beatrice, and I am the Systems Training Manager for the city's Revenue Department. But for today's demonstration, I am going to be a CPA who needs to register a disregarded entity for one of my clients on the Philadelphia Tax Center. Also, please note that I am using a testing environment for this demo, so all customer and account information that you may see is not real, and it is made up. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, and can everyone see the Philadelphia Tax Center? Perfect. My client, Betty White, is already registered with business income and receipt, net profit tax accounts, but her disregarded entity, Dance Co. LLC, isn't registered with the city and needs a wage tax account. So that is what I'm going to be demonstrating for you today. So let's begin. Here on the Philadelphia Tax Center, I am going to select Register a New Taxpayer in the New Taxpayers panel. This window displays all the tax types that you are able to register for on the Tax Center. In the registration panel, right here, you can see a whole list where, and this is not listed based off of your entity type. This is just letting you know which ones are available if at any time you come on to register for any accounts. In this registration type panel for this demo, I am going to select yes, where it asks me, are you a third-party tax professional registering on behalf of your client? So for this, I'm just going to select yes. On the next window, this shows us the different entity types that you can choose from. I'm going to go ahead and select disregarded entity. But if the sole owner or the sole proprietor, the parent company wasn't registered yet, this is where I would be able to select them first, because it is important that the sole proprietor of the LLC or of the disregarded entity is registered before registering the disregarded entity. But since my client, Betty White, is already registered with both BIR, the business income and receipt, and NPT, the net profit tax accounts, I'm just going to go ahead and select disregarded entity and LLC and the limited liability company, and then continue on. Okay, taking a look at the next window, we see a list of the tax types that a disregarded entity can choose from. So it's different than the one we saw before, where before we saw it had business income receipt, the net profit, but because a disregarded entity is not liable to file the BIR and NPT, those two tax types you can see are not here. I mean, these are the available tax types that we would be able to choose from later on in this process. And there you also see descriptions of a disregarded entity and also for the business owner information. This also is a reminder to let you know that the business owner needs to be registered first with the business income and receipt tax account before registering the disregarded entity. So we'll go ahead and continue. Okay, here on the owner name, this is where I'm going to be adding the information for Betty White. I'm not going to be entering the information for the disregarded entity yet. That's going to be down a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and select Social Security number, and then I'm going to go in and enter her number. And then her name. Now, if I was to go ahead and press next, and the number that I entered here is not registered, I'm going to see that this message pops up letting me know that the ID is not registered and that I have to go ahead and do that first. But luckily, I had just made a little typo, and so I can go ahead and quickly fix that and continue on. Here, I am now going to select the tax types that I want to register the disregarded entity for. So I'm going to choose wage. And also the LLC Dance Co. does own a property. So I'm going to pick property taxes and fees as well. On this window where it says ID and name, this is where now I am going to be entering in the disregarded entity information. It already is defaulted to federal employer ID. And so here I'm just going to go ahead and enter in the EIN and their legal name. And then on this line, I'm entering the start date for when the disregarded entity was formed. So let's just say 1/1/2025. And then it asks if I'm using a trade name. For this demo, I'm just going to go ahead and click select no. Okay, on this next window, this is the information for the wage tax account. So the tax account start date might be different than the date we just selected on the previous screen, where that was the start of the business. For this wage tax, I'm just going to go ahead and put 2/1/2025, and then the number of employees and an estimate of how much monthly amount withholding. Moving right along, on this next window, we're going to be selecting the North American Industry Classification System code. If you're like me and many others, you may not know the code off the top of your head. So you can go ahead and select search by industry. And then in this industry keyword, I'm just going to go ahead and put in any word that would relate to what the business for this disregarded entity is. And here it's dance companies. So I'm going to go ahead and select this one. It gives me a description to just make sure that this is the code that I want to select. And I'm going to go ahead and select yes. And now that is set. And we're going to continue on by selecting next. The next window is where we're going to put the mailing address for the business. So let me go ahead and fill that out. And we always want to go ahead and validate the address. It's something that will be required. You wouldn't be able to continue on without validating. So we'll go ahead and save. And then here's a question asking, does the entity own this property? Since Dance Co. LLC is one of the owner of records, I'm going to go ahead and select yes. If Betty White, the sole proprietor or the parent company of a property, owned it, I would not be selecting that here because this is for the disregarded entity only. So I'm going to go ahead and select yes, and then continue on. On this next screen where you see, are any of these you? We can see that Dance Co. LLC is listed. This is because in our tax system with the Revenue Department, Dance Co. LLC is listed as one of the property owners. Under here where it says property owners not available to claim, and you see Jim Rollins, he is also in our system as a secondary owner, but since we did not enter his information up here, we're not able to select him. So we're going to go ahead and just select the correct entity, Dance Co. LLC, and select OK. Next, it's asking us, is your business location the same as your mailing address? I'm going to select yes. And then it asks, do you have more than one business location in Philadelphia or nearby? For this demo, I'm going to select no, but again, this would just relate to the taxpayer and the entity that you are registering at the time. And then it asks, do you own any rental properties in Philadelphia? Again, if you select yes, it's going to have you answer a couple more questions and then you can list the rental properties. But for this, I'm going to select no. and continue on. This next window is where I can add any additional properties that the entity may own. But for this, this Danceco LLC only owns 1234 Market Street. Now this next part, this is where you have the option to create a username for the Philadelphia Tax Center. Since I'm a CPA, where a lot of people have this, where they already have access to their one client's accounts and already have a username, for you to be able to manage multiple accounts, you do not need to keep creating a username each time. You can select no at this window because you'll be able to sign in with your already existing username and password and request access to all the accounts that after we complete the registration process for this customer. But if you did need to create a username or password, you can go ahead and select yes. For this, I'm going to select no, and I'll show you the steps of requesting that access once we're done with the registration. So moving right along, here we're going to enter in the contact information. I'm going to enter in my name since I am the one entering in this information. And email, you will always have to confirm your email to make sure that they're correct. And I'll select next. Then here we have the registration summary. You're going to want to review this page just to make sure that everything you see here is correct. If any changes that are need to be made, you can go ahead and press previous, or you can always go back and just by clicking on the status bar at the top to know what different stages you're at, and then scrolling back to the end. If you are ready to submit, you're just going to mark this box where you're declaring under penalty of perjury that the information I have entered is accurate to the best of my knowledge. And once that's confirmed, you're going to go ahead and click submit. Okay, and now the confirmation page is displayed. I print this out for my records because this confirmation number is one of the ways that you are able to verify gaining access to the accounts that we just registered. So if you want to jot this down or print it out, you can go ahead and print the confirmation page. So let's go back. Do you want me to take a pause here, or do you want me to continue and then take questions at the very end in case it might answer questions for you?
I haven't seen any in the chat specifically about registration, so I think you can keep going. There are a number of questions in the chat that we will answer, I think, after you're done doing a demo, because they're a little bit more related to like technical questions.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so now we're back on the Tax Center homepage, and I'm going to go ahead and log in. So I know my username is Tax. I'm going to use my password. Okay. And here on this login page, you can see a list of the different clients that I have access to already. We see my client Betty White, but what we don't see here is Danceco LLC. And that's because at this part is where I'm going to be requesting the access so that I am able to view and manage the Danceco LLC entity accounts as well as my other clients and Betty. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and select, I can select my name or Betty, either one will work. The main tab that we want to get to is this More Options tab. So once you see More Options, you'll go ahead and click that or select the More Options tab, and then let's scroll down. Here in the third party access panel, I'm going to choose Request Access to an Existing Tax Account. On the instructions window, this lists the 6 different verification method options that you'll have in this requesting process, where you can choose one of these 6 to provide that information. If you do not have any of this information on hand, you are able to request a letter ID. That letter will be sent to the mailing address, and then the letter ID that's on that letter is what you will have to provide back to us on this tax center. But that letter does take about 5 to 7 business days to get to you. So with our new system, if you do have something like the confirmation number or the account ID related to the account you're requesting, you will be able to gain access very quickly. So let's continue on. Okay, and this is asking again, are you third-party tax professional. For this demo, I'm selecting yes. If you weren't, it's still going to ask me the same next questions. So here I'm going to choose Federal ID and enter in for Dansko LLC. So. And this would be the same process if I didn't have access to Betty White or another client. I would be doing the same thing. I would just be entering in their information. And now here's where I can select the account that I want to add. So I'm going to select the add access to account hyperlink, and I'm going to choose wage. And then the access level, this is going to be for my username. When I log on, I want access to be able to file returns and make payments. And again, this is just like if you were, say, not a CPA, and this was for your own accounts and you wanted to give someone else access, they are able to request different levels of access. But for this, we'll go ahead and do file returns and make payments. And then I'm selecting one of the verification methods. Since I do have the confirmation number, I'm selecting that, and I'll go ahead and enter there. If I wanted to add in, if say we were, starting fresh and I had the business and net profit accounts that I needed access to for a different person, you would be able to continue adding on if we had multiple. So I'm going to continue. Here's just showing you which accounts we did select before submitting. So once we press submit, it will let us know that access is granted to these accounts. So let's just go back to the my profile. So if I click on my name here, it's going to show me this page, and I'll say work with somebody else. And now we can see that Dansko LLC is listed on the page as who do I want to work with. And I can then go in and view their wage tax and be able to do anything else for my client. And that about wraps up the demo part.
So Kelly, so this feels in the demo that you've shown, it feels a little hinky, right? Like, because essentially it's two parts, right? You have to basically tell us that there's a business, this disregard, one, the parent company, and then potentially the subsidiaries or the child companies. You'd have to like kind of create accounts, and then you as a third party professional have to go back in and then request access to those accounts, right?
Yes, and also I will say that the wording of third party may throw some people off, because if, say, Betty White did not have a CPA or a tax account and she was doing this on her own, Betty White still would have had to register her social security number and get the BIR and MPT. And during that process, she could have created a username during then. And then when she had to go in and do the steps I did, where she registered and selected disregarded entity, for Betty to be able to see both her accounts under her social and accounts under EIN, she has to request access. So it's not just a step that a third party or tax professional would be doing. Just even a regular taxpayer who is doing this on their own, for them to be able to view any accounts under their social and any other EINs that they may have access to, or even, parents, like actual fathers, they might be ones who want to, file the school income tax for their kids or anything like that. They are able to request access doing this to their child or spouse's accounts, doing it this way. So it's not just tax professionals or someone who considers himself a third party. This is the way you would do it to be able to gain access for any tax account, no matter who you are.
Okay. I really appreciate that explanation. I don't see questions in the chat about registration, but we'll always take them and do our best to answer them. There is a guide, a PDF guide that kind of follows the steps that Kelly just outlined, and we'll put that in the chat, and we'll also share that with attendees who registered with us, and so that you can get access to that. I am going to go back to the presentation. Kelly, are you able to stop sharing?
Yes, and also that guide that Rebecca did mention does have all the steps for registering a new taxpayer, registering existing taxpayer, responding to a letter, verifying the letter, and also the third-party access. So that guide has tons of pages and tons of information for everyone. Thank you.
Before we
Thank-
you jump off, Kelly, one of the questions about registration is, can you change the NIC code later? Can you edit this information if you made a mistake?
Yes, you can. And also, that's always something too. If you ever call into taxpayer services, they can also update that as well.
There you go. So we answered that for you, Cynthia. Another, it's not strictly registration, but might be related. When applying for a rental license on Eclipse, if it's properly set up in the back end and link all the properties, they say, should we ask or use the FT number if the LLC which owns the rental property is a single member LLC, or should we input the parent's entity's FT number on the commercial activity license? And I believe Kristen replied this, but just want to make sure that was addressed. Is that the licensure information should be registered with the LLC information because the LLC owns the property. You should, however, make sure the parent's company information is registered with revenue. And Kristen, that to confirm, if they do the steps that Kelly just walked us through, which is linking the accounts and the parent company on the tax center, then all of this should be streamlined in Eclipse as well.
Everything will be connected.
Right.
So
You don't
they'll
have
be
to
able to
contact
see-
revenue if you do it yourself, or you can contact revenue to make sure the parent companies and the LLCs are all linked in the back end if you don't do it yourself.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
part of the impetus for this webinar is that if you needed to link a disregarded entity to a parent company, you used to have to call us because
Right.
we didn't have it set up on the tax center for you to be able to connect them yourself. This is the kind of a new improved way to do this. And so now that we kind of have it all in one recorded webinar, I'm pretty excited to start sharing that for people because I'm hopeful that will reduce the amount of time that our taxpayers have to wait on the phone for that to be done.
There's another
I think-
question. It says during registration, it asks you to input the monthly withholding. Where would I get this value? And I think this is more of a accounting question, but
It's Kristen, is this like
Yes,
an
right.
estimate of how much you think you're going to withhold from your employees, right?
oh, okay.
Correct. We will default them at quarterly. However, if it should be a monthly filer, then they should input, I think it's more than 16,000 for a monthly filing.
Right. Like if
So
you're a really
16,000
big employer, we want you to pay wage tax more often than just quarterly. So I think those thresholds are put on our website. But like, if you employ 1,500 people or 2,500 people, those folks, they remit wage tax to us every 2 weeks. And then mid-sized businesses monthly, and then much smaller businesses do it quarterly. Is that correct, Crisinda?
So it depends on the threshold, like it, and what you were talking about as far as like the every 2 weeks. If you have a business that has a payroll that is every other week, then that we will accept the semi-monthly payroll. However, for everyone else, if you are submitting $16,000 or more than $16,000, then you would be a monthly filer, and we would want that monthly.
Yeah.
There's a question from Margaret Higgins. Did Dance Co. LLC show real estate account? They missed that part.
We didn't demonstrate that as in the demo, but in our example, we were assuming that the individual LLC owns the property that their business is on. So that LLC would then be responsible for real estate tax. But we didn't show that registration. But I'm assuming, and Kelly, I'm assuming that you would just say, I want access to that property, or I want to link that property as the owner, as an LLC who's an owner, I want to link that property.
Yeah, for real estate tax, the site is still tricky. I know they are working on it to where you're able to add it on your own. I will have to check to see if that is now in production, but I know with this, the step where we added the property to the Danceco LLC was actually because what it did was change in our system. Danceco LLC was only in our tax system, what revenue calls Prism, as a property owner for 1234 Market Street under real estate temp ID. But now since I selected that I was the owner there, it updated the real estate temp ID to my EIN. and like link the property there. You still will need to call in to have access added to the weblog to view the real estate tax.
That is a very complicated, that's very complicated, unfortunately. So what is going on is that, it's just some very inside baseball information in that, like, in many cases within our system, we have like an owner listed, but then you are the owner, and like we actually have to like kind of connect those two things in our system, and verify your identity that this person right here says is the owner that we have on record. And so that's a little complicated, and that is an improvement that we're working on that I hope to share with folks in the next, ideally sooner rather than later, but let's say within the next 6 months, we'll have a solution for some of that. So I'm sorry that is a very complicated answer to say that it's still complicated. Okay, just very quickly, this is a slide that we share with all of our presentations. It's just a list of how to reach out to us. So if you're having tax clearance issues, tax.clearance@phila.gov can direct you on how to resolve whatever issue is happening about why, for whatever reason, you can't get tax clearance, if you're missing accounts or excuse me, if you're missing returns, or you've missed a payment, or maybe some accounts aren't linked correctly. Tax clearance can help direct all of that. If you have account level questions, revenue@phila.gov is the place to go. I recommend always that people email us rather than call us, because we don't want you to have to stay on the phone. And also, when you email us, you have a record of what our answer is. So like it's not just verbal, you actually have a record of the answer. And I think that's probably important if you're trying to refer to it in the future. Okay. And then we do have in-person services here in Center City at 1401 JFK. We have a North Philadelphia office, and we have an office up in the Northeast. You can do anything that you would have done in Center City, you can do at those satellite offices. So if you need to set up a payment agreement or make a payment or whatever the case may be, those are some locations. The Northeast Philadelphia office and the North Philadelphia office kind of have better parking than in Center City. So just heads up. Again, email us. It's probably the easiest.
Rebecca, if I may, real quick, during the contact information, someone in the chat earlier had a question that they were having tax clearance issues. So that was the tax clearance email in that slide. And also about the centers, if you need to link any of the accounts and something is giving any you troubles in the tax center, you can utilize the satellite centers for that as well, to set up properly your parent companies and all that.
And as always, we encourage you to sign up for our newsletter. I'm so excited about the number of people who registered and are attending this event. Clearly there is a need and a desire for people to understand more. I know that like ultimately people really want to do the right thing. They want to pay their taxes, and we want to help provide the resources that make that easier. So if you sign up for our newsletter, we never spam you. We only send you information that you need to know, like rate changes, like events like this, important deadlines that are coming up. So heads up on that. And I think that is everything. Again, we welcome your feedback on how we did and if this was helpful. And if you need more information or different topics or a different time or whatever we can do to help share this information in a way that's digestible for you, please let us know. You can drop those in the chat, or you can always email us. We are excited to be here, and I see that the chat has slowed down, so I think we're going to wrap it up. But again, this will get posted online. We'll share those resources on on our YouTube and also with attendees. And appreciate your time today very, very much. I know you have a busy day, and so thank you for your day with us.